There are stories that start with a breakup, but this one starts with a breaking point. Jaliyah saying she is done with FunnyMike after 8 years is already enough to pull attention. But the reason this hit so hard is because it did not come across like another temporary online relationship update. It sounded final. It sounded like somebody deciding they have seen enough, heard enough, and are no longer willing to keep carrying the same weight. And once that happens in public, the whole conversation changes. What makes this situation feel so heavy is that it is not being framed as one single problem. It is not just a relationship ending. It is not just one response video. It's not just one rumor. It is a chain of things, all hitting the same family at once. Jaliyah is stepping away after years together. FunnyMike is pushing back on what is being said about him. The internet is watching every move. And somewhere underneath all of that is the part that no one can make lighter. A teenager's death in the same wider circle, which turns a messy public story into something much darker. Jaliyah's decision lands first, because it is the cleanest line in the whole situation. She said she is done. She tied that decision to assault allegations and to what she says her children had to witness. That matters, because it shows this was not presented like a couple needing space. It was presented like somebody reaching the point where staying no longer feels like an option. When a parent starts talking about what their children saw, the conversation stops being about adult emotion and starts becoming about what kind of home exists behind the scenes. FunnyMike and Jaliyah have not been strangers to public attention. They have been part of the same online universe for years. People watch them as a couple, watch them as parents, watch them as a family brand, and watch the ups and downs that came with that kind of visibility. That means the breakup did not land in a vacuum. People already felt like they knew them. That is exactly why the reaction was so fast. The public does not just see a breakup. It sees the collapse of something it has been tracking for years. First seg. Then, the story gets more complicated because Jaliyah's message did not stop at the breakup. She also pointed at FunnyMike and said he has additional children on the way. That kind of claim changes the temperature of a story instantly. It is not just about romance anymore. It comes about trust, dishonesty, and what may have been happening behind the curtain while the relationship still existed in public view. The moment that allegation entered the conversation, everybody stopped looking at the breakup as one event and started looking at it like proof of a bigger pattern. FunnyMike pushed back publicly and denied the rumor that he has 2 children on the way. He also said he is single. At the same time, he made it clear that if he did have children involved, he would not hide them. That response did not end the conversation. It extended it. Once both sides are speaking, the internet does what it always does best. It starts choosing a version of the truth before the details are fully settled. Some people believe Jaliyah's tone and see her decision as overdue. Some believe FunnyMike's denial and think the whole thing is being blown up online. Others are sitting in the middle, just watching the story get heavier with each new post. What keeps pulling people back to Jaliyah's side of the story is the way she framed a decision around her children. That detail is hard to ignore.
One thing you ain't gonna win with these females is the other females that come behind them. Y'all know that's right,
She did not sound like she was chasing a headline. She sounded like someone who was thinking about the effect of the situation on her kids. That turns the breakup from a relationship issue into a parenting issue, and that shift changes everything. When a mother says she wants to set a better example, people listen differently. The focus is no longer on whether a couple can reconcile. The focus becomes whether the environment is still healthy enough to remain in. That is also why FunnyMike's public image matters so much here. He built a brand that has long been connected to family life. Humor, skits, and the idea of being part of a public household people could follow over time. When a brand like that gets hit with allegations involving assault and hidden children, the damage is not limited to one post or one day. The audience starts going back through old clips, old moments, old family content. and reevaluating all of it. What once looked like everyday family entertainment starts feeling different when the trust underneath it is questioned. And that is where the story becomes bigger than the internet fight around it. Public figures often think they can control the parts of the story they want people to see. But once a relationship, a family, and a public image are all built in the open, those same public pieces become the thing people use against you when the story turns ugly. It does mean the public response becomes much harder to manage because the audience already feels invested in the family's history. At the same time, this is still a story that has to be handled with care. Jaliyah has made allegations. FunnyMike has denied part of what is being said. Those are two different versions of the same public moment. What should not be done is turning either side into a cartoon villain or assuming every line is already proven. The weight of the claims is enough without needing to invent details around them. The responsible way to talk about the situation is to keep the difference clear between accusation, denial, and confirmation. Then the entire atmosphere changes again because of the lost tie to Tyrone Dunn. Reports connected him to FunnyMike's family circle and described him as a younger cousin.
Babe, I'm here. It's gonna be okay.
Ah! The babies are coming!
Push, babe, you got this. Wait, what? It's too...
He was 15 years old. He was killed in a Baton Rouge shooting. That is not a side note. That is the kind of event that shifts the whole emotional center of the story. Once that news enters the conversation, the breakup drama is still there, the denial is still there, the internet noise is still there, but the emotional weight changes completely. A teenage death is not another headline in the same way a breakup allegation is another headline. It is a real loss. It is the kind of thing that changes how everyone around the situation speaks, thinks, and reacts. Suddenly, the public story is not just about a couple separating or a claim being denied. Damien's. It is also about a family and a wider circle mourning somebody who will not get another year, another birthday, or another chance. That kind of loss cannot be flattened into content without losing what matters most. The contrast between those two parts of the story is what makes the whole thing so hard to hold. On one side, you have adults in a public relationship fighting through allegations, denials, and responses. On the other, you have a teenager whose life ended in violence. Those are not equal in emotional scale, and they should not be treated like they are. But because they are all connected to the same family world, they end up sitting in the same public conversation. And that makes the situation feel heavier than a normal celebrity dispute. This is what public life does when it becomes too close to private life. It turns every conflict into a spectacle, but it cannot turn tragedy into something lighter. That is why this chain of events feels so uncomfortable. The breakup story has enough material to keep the internet busy on its own. The response from FunnyMike has enough fuel to keep people arguing. But Tyrone Dunn's death makes it impossible to stay only in gossip mode. It forces a different tone, one that asks people to stop treating everything like a debate. If you zoom out far enough, the story becomes less about one post and more about the cost of public visibility. Jaliyah and FunnyMike have both lived in a world where family life is content, reactions matter, and silence never really stays silent. That kind of environment creates attention, but it also creates pressure. Every emotional statement gets broken apart by strangers who feel entitled to judge what they do not live. For Jaliyah, this looks like a line being drawn after years of public and private strain. She is saying she is finished, and she is connecting that decision to what she says happened and to what her children saw. For FunnyMike, this looks like damage control mixed with public pushback. He is denying parts of the story, answering the rumor directly, and trying not to let one narrative define him completely. For the family grieving Tyrone Dunn, none of that public back and forth matters nearly as much as the fact that a young life ended too soon. That is the part people should not rush past. The internet loves the breakup because it is easy to replay. It likes the response because it gives people a side to take. It even likes the rumor because it creates more to argue about. But grief does not work like that. A teenager being killed in a shooting is not a debate prompt. It is a reminder that the world outside the screen is still very real, and sometimes the realest thing in the story is also the most painful one. So if you put it all together, the shape of the story becomes clear. One relationship is ending after 8 years. One public figure is pushing back on claims about children and denial. A wider family circle is dealing with a teenage death that overshadows everything else. Those are 3 different kinds of pain, but they all sit in the same public space. That is why the story feels so unstable. It is not one thing falling apart. It is several things hitting at once. And maybe that is the part worth sitting with the most. Not the arguments, not the replies, not the rumor cycles. The real thing underneath all of it is that people who live publicly do not get to separate their mess from their mourning. The same audience that watches a breakup also watches a tragedy. The same timeline that argues over a response also carries a loss that nobody can undo. That is what gives this whole situation its weight. At the end of the day, the breakup will keep getting discussed, the denial will keep getting repeated, and the online reaction will keep shifting from one side to another. The moment that should stay strongest is the one tied to Tyrone Dunn. A teenager lost his life in Baton Rouge. That part is not content. That part is not a trend. That part is a loss that deserves to be held with care, not folded into the noise. So the final picture is not just a relationship ending. It is a public family dealing with conflict, public pushback, and a real tragedy, all at the same time.